Are you all hearing okay? Okay, good. It's a great honor to be here today and to take part of this historic and important endeavor. When I was a boy, the Gloversville Free Library was my lifeline. I was a voracious reader. In our family, there wasn't much of a budget for books. My mother walked me here every other Saturday morning and waited with infinite patience while I made my selections. If memory serves, we were allowed to check out 6 books at a time and could keep them 2 whole weeks, which struck me as wonderful. Who would do such a generous thing and expect nothing in return? When I was old enough to make the journey on my own and borrow books on my own card, it was a major milestone in my young life. In its way, just as important as getting my driver's license years later. The two represented to me pretty much the same thing: freedom to travel without adult supervision. Because library security, I was thrilled to discover, was lax. Kids my age were supposed to be restricted to the kids and young adult room, but I yearned for the good stuff. And I discovered that when I turned left at the circulation desk and headed toward the young adult room, I could double back and enter the adult stacks. Every time a librarian found me there, I expected to be herded back where I belonged, but it never happened. And I gradually came to realize that, unlike school, there was nobody here who wanted to hold me back. My own interests and abilities would determine what was appropriate. There were alcoves with desks secreted among the stacks where I could read books that I knew better than to bring home. Lurid science fiction titles, mostly with scantily clad women on the covers, written by such known pornographers as Edgar Rice Burroughs and H. Rider Haggard. A decade or so ago, my cousin Greg phoned to tell me that, thanks to a budget crunch, the Gloversville Library might have to close its doors. Was there anything I could do? So I wrote an op-ed piece for the newspaper explaining what the library had meant to me as a boy, that I likely never would have become a writer, but for its existence. I concluded by saying that I understood that potholes in the roads needed to be filled, and fire trucks needed to be maintained, and 911 phones had to be manned. But I also argued that libraries were life-giving and life-affirming places, that the library shouldn't be viewed as a luxury, but rather as essential to the community's life. I made the mistake of ending the letter by saying that I would rather close every church and bar in Gloversville. A remark widely misinterpreted as suggesting that I didn't approve of bars and churches, whereas I merely meant to suggest how deep my debt of gratitude was. Libraries like this one, in towns like Gloversville, I believe, are the beating heart of our democracy. Thanks in large part to those wonderful Saturday mornings here in this library, I now have a library of my own. My wife and I are both voracious readers, and the books are double stacked on the shelves throughout our house. When we moved to Portland 2 years ago, the first thing that we did was build floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in the living room of our new house, realizing that it would be folly to attempt to move in until this was accomplished, like trying to live in a house without a kitchen. These days, when I hear about books that interest me, a book that interests me, I go down to my local independent bookstore and buy it. Portland has a fine, well-funded public library, and I attend many events there, but in the 2 years that I've lived in Portland, I've never checked out a single book. That's the irony. Educated, relatively well-to-do people generally like libraries, love them. They like the idea of libraries, but they don't need them the way people with fewer resources do. We live in a strange time. It's not at all unusual to hear these days that poor people, it's not unusual to hear poor people blamed for their poverty. and the same is true of poor communities. Our faith in both government and public institutions has been seriously eroded. I continue to believe in both. In America, we love stories of self-made men who pull themselves up by their bootstraps. And no doubt there are such men, but I'm not one. Whatever success I've had was built on the devotion and example of people like Dick LeVarn, my grandfather, and his daughter Jean, my mother, who offered me no choice but college, and my father, Jim Russo, who paid my union dues all year when I was away at college so that I would have summer work. But, just as importantly, I am a product of public education, government-backed student loans, and publicly funded institutions like the Gloversville Free Library. If you've lost faith in such institutions, you've lost faith in our basic democratic principles, I think. Do I have myself to thank for my success? Don't make me laugh. I don't even know where my bootstraps are. So here we are again. The world's still spinning, nothing much changing. There are new potholes that need to be filled, fire engines that need to be maintained, 911 phones that need to be manned, and classrooms to be staffed. None of this is cheap, and Gloversville isn't flush. So why support a major renovation of Gloversville's library, and why do it now? Well, the building sorely needs it. The building sorely needs it, and there is such a thing as being too late. The window that's open today may not be tomorrow, and that would be a terrible, terrible shame. But to my mind, the even greater urgency is that right now, this minute, there are famous scholars, painters, photographers, architects, filmmakers, or novelists making use of the Gloversville Free Library. You haven't noticed them? You don't know who they are? Well, they themselves don't know who they are. They're only 12 years old, after all. But their imaginations, like my own imagination at age 12, their imaginations are being stimulated in ways that even they don't understand. At their age, I had no idea I'd be a writer. Despite the love and devotion of my family and friends, I had no great confidence that I would amount to anything at all. But in this good, safe place, among these stacks, I began to sense how vast the world was and to feel my own hunger for it.